Welcome to New York's #2 sports show. The MLB trade deadline has come and gone, and the Yankees have made a few moves on deadline day. Of course, we've already discussed what ended up being the biggest acquisition for the Yankees, and that was acquiring Chas Chisholm Jr. from the Miami Marlins. And early returns are very good. So I'm recording this after Game 2 of the Phillies series, and so Chisholm, and we'll discuss it more on tomorrow's series recap episode. And please like and subscribe. It would be greatly appreciated for the channel. But Jazz Chisholm has 4 home runs in his first 3 games as a Yankee. I believe that's the first Yankee to ever do so in their entire history. So no small feat. And he's played third base and has looked really good so far. I'm sure there's going to be some growing pains, but you couldn't ask for a better start for Jazz Chisholm. So, again, I want to evaluate and discuss these acquisitions with not having those things in mind, but it's a little bit there in the case. And let's just jump right into it. But there's a lot of different things to discuss. But the Yankees acquire Mark Leiter Jr., so the nephew of Al Leiter, the son of Mark Leiter Sr., and both of them were previously Yankees, in Al Leiter's case in the late 80s, and in the stint in the mid-2000s for Mark Leiter, early 90s. Not a whole lot for either, more so Al. And Al is the more accomplished pitcher by far. But Mark Leiter Jr., he's a bit of a late bloomer in his MLB success. And he really kind of found it with the Cubs as a reliever the last couple of seasons. And, I would say that I noticed him last season, but you look at his 2022 numbers with the Cubs, pretty good as well. And the good thing about him is he is a swing and miss guy, which this Yankee bullpen has desperately needed. But the funny thing is, he's not a flamethrower. He has a pretty wide arsenal. He kind of has a starter's arsenal, and he kind of mixes it up, but it really does work. And he has 53 strikeouts in 37 and a third innings. And in fact, I guess going into the trade, because what ends up happening is Mark Leiter actually comes into a really big spot in the 10th inning. Again, this will be discussed more at length in the recap episode. But Leiter is able to get out of the jam in a really tough spot in a tie game in the bottom of the 10th against his former Philly squad. But the funny thing is, he didn't get a strikeout there. So going into this trade, and so with the Cubs, 36 and a third innings, 53 strikeouts, which is one of the best K rates in baseball. And specifically, he's been really good lately. Like the month of July, unbelievable. Something again like along the lines of 8 and 2/3 innings, 1 hit. And that hit actually, I believe, came in this game, an infield hit. So actually, it had really been 7 and 2/3, no hits. No strikeout, no walks, and 14 strikeouts. That's what it was, which is insane. No hits, no walks, 14 strikeouts, and almost 8 innings of work. So, and with the Cubs, it was never really a 9th inning role, and that's the problem that I have. It was I don't love what I thought there was more that could have been done in this deadline. And again, there's a lot of different components to touch on. But the good thing as far as Leiter is concerned, I am excited about him. He is a high leverage reliever. He will be in the mix, but he's mostly been a 7th or 8th inning guy with the Cubs. Now, last season, he got a little bit of work in the 9th. He did get some saves. And so Leiter Jr. last year ended up with only 4, and they preferred him. I think he had a little bit of a multi-inning role. Let me see if that adds up. I think he's capable of it. I guess let me check out some of his game logs and see. He can give you more than an inning, but I mean, the most that he let's say this year was probably an inning and 2/3. He never went 2 innings in any outing. So it's not as if it's not like it's a specialty of his at this point. But what I'm trying to say is that he is definitely a guy that was more of a strictly 7th and 8th inning guy. Pitched definitely one of the more relied upon Cubs relievers in the last couple of seasons. But last year, whether it was Adbert Alzolay or this year, whether it being really more so Hector Neris, Leiter Jr. never really they didn't want to give it to him. And so that's the disappointment, because Clay Holmes, and there was another blown save in game 2 of this Phillies series. Clay Holmes is a very useful reliever. Don't get me wrong. But this is not a closer. In the way that he pitches, he would be really good in a setup type role. And you don't really have that bona fide closer. What I'm hoping is that somewhere along the line, it becomes sort of a committee situation and someone just emerges. Because I guess what the Yankees are doing, there are some pretty decent arms in the pen. Like in terms of the depth is getting better, I would say, especially with other arms on the mend coming back at some point. So you have options to choose from, but it just feels like it does lack that total shutdown top end guy. But I'll get back into that. With Mark Leiter Jr., again, very impressive numbers, really good lately. He did hit a bit of a funk in the middle of the season, sort of May, June. Wasn't great for him with the Cubs. But yeah, this is someone that I think will have what it takes to pitch New York. He's from Jersey. Again, he's got that lighter background, and Al was certainly a feisty, competitive guy who did not mind pitching in big spots. Mostly with the Mets, but still, I do like this acquisition. Now, going the other way, the Yankees traded a couple of top 30 prospects. In the case of Jack Neely, he was, I think, more so, and this is the MLB.com rankings. Neely was around 20 to 22 for the Yankees. And then Ben Cowles was more in that 28 to 30 range. So Jack Neely, right-handed pitcher or reliever, who really has had a very nice year, primarily or maybe even exclusively with Scranton. So I guess I wouldn't be too surprised to see him end up, making it to the Cubs roster sooner than later. But he is a reliever, someone that could really ascend to a high leverage top end type reliever. So it's not nothing there. Again, he's in his mid-20s. So again, a little bit on the older side. And I should say with Mark Leiter Jr. too, 33 years old. So, and what I should also mention with Mark Leiter is that he is under contract through 2026. So 2 more seasons of control beyond this season. So in the case of Chisholm, Leiter Jr., and the next person I'll mention, Enyel de Los Santos, and all of the cases for each of them, these are not rentals. These are pitchers that will be Yankees potentially at least through 2026. But Leiter Jr., he was with the Phillies, came up as a starter, I think, for the most part, and it didn't really work out in 17 and 18, and then didn't make his way back to the major leagues until a couple years ago in 2022, where he kind of found it with the Chicago Cubs. But again, Jack Neely and Ben Cowles, an infielder, he, I believe, was in Double-A, Cowles. And, so middle infielder, we'll see what happens for each of them, but not an insignificant return for the Cubs. But at the same time, Leiter, that's a pretty good get. And I do like that deal. And it's somewhat reminiscent, I guess, because of the trade partner being the Cubs, to the Scott Efros deal a couple years ago. Now, in the case of Efros, he was younger, but had a lot more years of control. That was definitely more of a futures move. And speaking of Efros, I think they see him or hope that he can be someone that does make an impact in this bullpen. They've kept him down at Scranton for a while now. I'd expect him to come up at some point. But, yeah, I mean, it does – weirdly, there is a bit of a logjam. We'll talk about the roster in a little bit. But, again, Leiter for Neely and Cowles. Then the next move that happens – and this one wasn't too much of a surprise, was Caleb Ferguson is traded away to the Houston Astros. And for Ferguson, it didn't work out. And he will be a free agent at the end of the year. And the Yankees, I'll quickly say in return, they get right-handed pitcher Kelly Austin, an international signing bonus money. So Kelly Austin, I think he's at high A, right-handed pitcher. Want to say he might be a reliever, but don't completely hold me to that. Not going to get too deep into that. He's not like a top 30 prospect. Caleb Ferguson, honestly, for the fact that he's a lefty and that he still does have striking ability, you kind of knew there would be a little bit of trade value, but I'm sure him being designated for assignment at some point would not have been a complete shock either. So noteworthy on this in the sense that he was someone that was thought of to be an important piece to the pen. He was really one of the high leverage relievers to start the season, but it did not work out. And this is not surprising that Ferguson is gone, but hey, he goes from the Dodgers to the Yankees to the Astros, all organizations that have had, a lot of success. And so clearly the Astros see something in Ferguson. It would be kind of ironic if the Yankees saw the Astros in the playoffs and Ferguson was in there for Houston. But we'll save that for another time. But for Ferguson, just to struggle, ends up going 1-3 with a 5.13 ERA, 33 and thirds innings, 41 strikeouts, which that's good, but a 1.50 WHIP, which is really bad. Just a 250 opposing batting average. Again, 16 walks is not great. Like, it just didn't work out. 5 home runs isn't very good. Caleb Ferguson goes to the Astros, and this makes sense. But it only leaves the Yankees with one lefty in the pen. And what I should also mention is Mark Leiter's splitter is nasty and very effective versus lefties. So you do have Leiter Jr. You do have Canely, who is really more effective versus lefties and righties. But Tim Hill, he's your only lefty in the pen. And I'll bring up someone else that I think could maybe eventually be in the pen come playoff time, but we'll get there. The Yankees, their final move is acquiring Enyel de Los Santos from the San Diego Padres. Pretty big build, 6'3", 235. This is almost like a swap for Caleb Ferguson, except De Los Santos is a righty and Ferguson's a lefty, and Ferguson was going to be a free agent. De Los Santos, he is, like I said, going to be under team control through 2026. And this trade, the Yankees acquired De Los Santos and Thomas Balboni Jr., who is a minor league right-hander. And in exchange, the Yankees trade outfielder Brandon Lockridge, who is an older player considering he's in the minors, AAA, Scranton, total speed guy, no power. He's someone that we've seen a bit in spring training. I don't think he was someone that was ever seriously considered to be called up. So a change of scenery for him. But again, De Los Santos and Balboni Jr. and Brandon to the Yanks and Brandon Lockridge to the San Diego Padres. So for De Los Santos, again, this is definitely a lower level deal than with Leiter Jr. He'll be on the roster, and we'll see if it lasts. Look, he's struggled lately. You look at his numbers, whereas Leiter Jr. has been lighting it up. De Los Santos, not so much. For the Padres, more of a middle relief guy. Certainly not someone that was used in too many big spots. Seems like he has a pretty nice. It seems like there could be some not even, I wouldn't call it reclamation project, but Blake, there's some potential here, and I say that mostly because of what the numbers were with the Cleveland Guardians. So he was with Cleveland in 2022 and 2023. Ironically, he also came up as a starter, but like Leiter Jr. with the Phillies in the late 2010s, so kind of right around the same time. But he transitioned to a reliever and found success with Cleveland. And he didn't have a huge role with them, although last year he kind of did. Last year, 16 holds, which is not nothing in 70 games. But in 2022, 5-0 with a 3.04 ERA, a 107 WHIP, 208 opposing batting average against, good K rate. And then last season, 5-2 with a 3.29 ERA, 65 and two-thirds innings, 62 strikeouts. So the rate kind of goes down a little bit, but still 1.14 WHIP, 216 opposing batting average. So pretty solid numbers. And if you probably wouldn't remember, but he actually did appear in a couple of postseason games against the Yankees in that 2022 ALDS versus the Guardians. He had pitched in game 1 when they were losing, and then in game 3 when they were losing, which actually resulted, which was pretty key because the Guardians ended up coming back and winning that game. That was the game where Oscar Gonzalez, who ironically is in AAA in the Yankees organization, got that walk-off hit against Clark Schmidt. Well, De Los Santos actually kept that game in check. So it's not as if he hasn't seen postseason ball. So I understand some of the appeal, but at the same time, I don't. De Los Santos will be definitely lower in the pecking order in this Yankee bullpen. But again, the Padres, here's the biggest issue. He's allowed 11 home runs, which is crazy for a reliever. 11 homers in just a little more than 40 innings. But again, there is potential there. He does have a pretty big arm, and they're going to see what they can work with. So now looking more into this, Jack Flaherty, it comes out, Ken Rosenthal reports that Jack Flaherty, actually, the Yankees had a deal in place with the Tigers, but due to medicals, the Yankees backed out. And so I do believe this is real, but I am a little bit skeptical because Yankee fans are upset that they feel like they didn't do enough. And to add more to this, Garrett Cole today was scratched from his start due to what was termed as general body soreness. It does not sound like it's an IL situation. The plan is for him to hopefully be back, I think, as soon as this weekend for the series against the Blue Jays. And so Will Warren actually made the start, actually pitched all right. Now, going back to De Los Santos, what I would think would happen, because the way you look at it, Leiter kind of took Ferguson's spot on the roster. I would expect De Los Santos to likely take Will Warren's spot, and also have mentioned Yoendris Gomez was sent down for Warren. But again, I think De Los Santos takes that Warren spot, but I guess we'll see. But I see no reason why that wouldn't be the case. But anyway, Cole. So you had that uncertainty with Cole. And I think the plan really was to acquire Jack Flaherty, who has really had very good numbers. Now, he's a rental, and he's had a resurgence. He was a really good pitcher for the St. Louis Cardinals for a while and really fell off a cliff. And last year he was traded to the Baltimore Orioles at the deadline. That didn't work out, but with the Tigers, he's found it. No doubt about it, across the board's impressive numbers, but he did have a lower back issue about a month ago, and I guess he had some injections, 2 to 3 injections that took place. I think he missed a start or two, but it hasn't really affected him, and the Dodgers thought enough of it to make the deal for him. Ironically, there was 2 pieces involved in that trade. It was not really much that the Dodgers traded away, in my opinion. One of them was like their number 8 prospect or so, maybe a little bit higher than that. And Trey Sweeney. Now, Trey Sweeney was acquired from the Yankees in the offseason for Victor Gonzalez and Yorvi Vivas. So that's a little bit of a bitter pill. It's a shame that Trey Sweeney was used as a pretty much key component to getting Jack Flaherty. But the opinion is kind of different now. If it is true that the Yankees kind of were the ones that had a deal in place and backed out for medicals, the whole thing is kind of different. And could it be a little bit of damage control by Cashman in the front office? I can't fully rule that out, but we'll take their word for it. And I think the plan as well, if that did happen, was that Nestor Cortez was going to be traded away. Now, there was a lot of rumors, and I think some validity to it, that Nestor Cortez would be traded and Tommy Edman was going to be brought in. So I think and that would have been very similar to the Montgomery for Harrison Bader trade a couple seasons ago, the Yankees-Cardinals deal. I think that could have happened. Kind of like how I talked about Efros with the Cubs. Some of these things kind of repeat themselves. Now, that didn't happen, and I think that some people would have been up in arms for the fact that Tommy Edman's been hurt, but here nor there, I wouldn't have minded trading away Nestor Cortez if you did get Jack Flaherty. All that to say, could Nestor Cortez eventually find his way in the bullpen in the postseason and be a lefty like matchup guy? I think it's possible. I do, because when I look at the pecking order, if Garrett Cole is healthy, which at this point is an F, Cole, we know that he's going to be in there. We know that Rodon, if he's healthy, will be in there. I don't really trust him, but he's been good enough in spurts, and the contract is such that he will be in there. But then after that, there is a lot of question marks. I want Luis Gil in the rotation, but I understand like the value he really would play. His velocity and his arsenal would play in the bullpen. So I get that. Clark Schmidt, like he is someone that is hopefully to return with about a month plus to go. So there's a lot of different options, but all that to say, like, you could have used another starter. Because again, Marcus Stroman's been struggling. He's not someone I fully trust. Nestor, it's been a rough season for him. So, again, a lot of question marks when it comes to the starting rotation. And the way I feel about this Yankee team in general, like with the offense, let's just kind of circle back on that and finish this up. I was hoping that there was a way that DJ LeMahieu would be off this roster, and that hasn't happened yet. But the more I think about it, like, so Giancarlo Stanton is back, and so Jahmai Jones is gone, and who else? And Jazz Chisholm's on the roster, so JD Davis is gone. Jason Dominguez is going to come up pretty soon, right? So that's one person. And whose roster spot does he take? And that doesn't include like someone like, let's say, like John Birdie. Now, and he had a bit of a setback, and that might not be till like rosters expand. So you may not have to really worry about that as much. But there's John Birdie. There is Anthony Rizzo. Again, I'm not looking forward to coming back. The point is this. If they stay healthy, and these things tend to work themselves out where players don't stay healthy, but LeMahieu, his role right now is he's a defensive first base replacement for Ben Rice, and it seems like he will get starts against lefties at first base instead of Rice. Now, for now, that's okay. I don't personally love it. I think, unfortunately, and again, LeMahieu was one of my favorite players a few years ago. he probably was my favorite player. He's cooked. He's simply cooked. And I don't see him turning it around. So I'm just saying, if it needs to be done and he needs to be designated for assignment, I think you got to do it. I know they don't want to. I know they want to avoid it for many reasons. But I think that I hope we're still headed there. So that was, there was a lot of talk about Yandy Diaz, and that would have been kind of interesting because I still think the corner spots are still, as much as Jazz Chisholm has been really good at third base, will that last? So, and first base is, as much as I like Ben Rice and what he can do, that's a question mark there as well for many reasons. He was a catcher, converted to first base, and he's done a good enough job defensively, and he's shown, good at bat quality, but still, who knows there? So I think there was more that could have been done. I would have been fine trading Gleyber Torres. And that's another thing, I spoke about this a little bit in the Red Sox recap, but it was weird that he didn't say more of the politically correct thing in the post-game presser and just be like, hey, wherever the team needs me. He was like, I'm a second baseman. I'm playing second base. And he makes too many mistakes, too many errors. He can make good plays. It's more of a mental thing. So, but that ship has sailed. And I think for Gleyber, this is likely the end. I'd be very surprised if they resign him for many reasons. So for Gleyber, nothing's going to be done there. That is what that is. I guess the more, though, that you again, if a Birdie comes back, a Dominguez comes in, and there's a bit of a logjam with Jazz Chisholm type versatility, I suppose there's a world where if Gleyber were to really struggle, he could be benched. Not very likely, though, to be honest, but I guess it's possible. But again, the roster logjam could get kind of interesting. I hope to kind of see how that unfolds. But but look, Chisholm was the big crown jewel acquisition. And so far, it's paying off very handsomely. And then Mark Leiter, that is that's not nothing. He's a big time arm, not for velocity, but for the strikeout ability. But again, the disappointments, like I said, the fact that I kind of want some of these. There were some players I kind of wanted out of here, whether that be in the rotation. Nestor, Nestor was a fan favorite for me, but in the right situation, wouldn't have minded a switch up there. Like I said, with LeMahieu and Gleyber, wouldn't have minded that kind of changing a little bit. And we'll still see with LeMahieu. I still think there's a chance that they may have to part ways. And then lastly with Clay Holmes. Clay Holmes, the fact that he is still the closer, it's scary. It's really, really scary. That is something that I want him to do well because I want the team to do well. But, 7 blown saves. He's blown 5 of his last 7 save opportunities. It gets to a point where you really have to where they're going to have to consider making changes. I just don't think you're going to be able to win a World Series with him as your closer, but they are very dead set on that right now. But at the same time, I think that they were engaged with Tyler Scott with the Marlins, who ended up going to the Padres. I do think there were some conversations as far as Pete Fairbanks. I think they did try to some degree. So if that's the case, then they have to be somewhat open to the idea of Holmes not being the closer, but they're going to go for now. But that does concern me a lot. So again, that's your trade deadline recap from the Yankees' perspective. Again, it could have been better, could have been worse. Time will tell what happens. But Jazz Chisholm's a Yankee, Mark Leiter Jr. is a Yankee, Enyel de Los Santos is a Yankee, Caleb Ferguson is out. And Jack Flaherty was almost a Yankee, but apparently medical concerns held that up. And I think now the Yankees are going to try to sell a bill of goods on returning players. Dominguez, Ian Hamilton, Scott Efros, maybe Lou Trevino, Nick Birdie. They're going to try to pump the tires on that and make that that those are trade deadline acquisitions. But yeah, that is your Yankee trade deadline recap for 2024. And look forward to discussing on the next episode what took place in the Yankees-Phillies series.